And for the rest of us, I want you to imagine for a second that you have a group of middle school kids in your backyard, 25 of them. And they're playing and they're laughing and they're having a fantastic time. And for 5 whole minutes, they are going to sit down and let you talk to them. If you had 5 minutes to tell a group of middle schoolers something that could change their lives, what would you tell them? This isn't a hypothetical question for me because just a few months ago, we had this exact situation. We invited middle schoolers over for the middle school version of Young Life, and we held it in our backyard over a series of 6 weeks. And Young Life, for those of you who don't know, is designed for the kid who would never walk into a church, a kid who has never heard anything about Jesus or about God or about the Bible. And at this event in our backyard, we had lots of fun. We played games, we sang songs, we ate snacks, and then we had a bunch of middle schoolers sit, and with 5 minutes, I told the students in front of me that the Bible opens with a powerful story. And I told them that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, everything. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God made the earth, and God made the sky, and God filled the earth with plants and trees, and he filled the sky with stars and the sun, and God made animals on the earth. And he made animals in the sky, and at each point, God looked at the things that he made, and he saw that it was good. But then God said, "Let us make humans in our image, after our likeness." So God created humans in his own image, male and female. He created them, and God blessed them and gave them important work to do. And God looked at all he had made, and he said, it was very good. That night, I didn't have any notes in front of me. I didn't have this written out in any way. I just know this story. You might find it familiar as well. But I told this simplified version of the creation story from Genesis 1 to a group of kids who would have not recognized it, right? But I told it in a very particular way so that this story might, for the first time, get their hooks into this group of students. Because what I wanted them to hear was one of the core messages that exists in the creation account. I reminded this group of middle schoolers that night of some of the places where they will hear messages about who they are and how they fit in this world. Right? Occasionally, they will have a science class where a teacher will tell them, like, you are nothing more than a cosmic accident. They might have a parent who tells them they were a literal accident. They might face a mean kid at school who insults them and tells them that they're worthless. And they're going to hear lots of messages online that tell them that they need to look a certain way, think a certain way, be a certain way if they are going to have any value in the world. But before there were science teachers, before there were parents, before there were bullies or social media, there was God. God who was in the beginning, who made everything on purpose and called it good. But God didn't stop with everything. He decided to make a special creature, a creature who would somehow bear his image, reflect what he is like. A creature who would be like God in some really special ways. This human, male and female, God's special creation, right? So special that once these humans were set up as part of God's world, God looked at it and goes, ooh, it's very good. Genesis 1 tells us, right, that you are not an accident. There is someone out there who made you. Who made you on purpose. Who made you for a purpose. And that means, like baseline, you matter. You matter to the one who made you. This is what I got to tell a group of middle schoolers on the first night of these 6 weeks in our backyard, right? This story in the Bible that announces that these middle schoolers, they matter to someone. I mean, it is a solid ground to stand on if, as they are making their way through middle school, ever wonder if they matter to anyone. And if it's been a bit since you've hung out with a middle schooler, trust me when I say they are always wondering if they matter to someone. And I wanted them to hear that no matter what anyone else says, there is a God who made them, and they matter to him. And I also let them know that if they aren't ready to believe that, that's totally fine. Because the adults that are here tonight think you matter. And so if you can't accept that you matter to God, just at least know that you matter to us. This is how stories work. Stories tell us something about the world that we live in. They tell us something about what might be beyond our world, right? I mean, they tell us something about who we are. They shape us. They shape our minds. They shape our desires. They shape our lives. And we know this, right? Because kids grow up with Disney stories that tell them to follow their hearts, to be true to themselves. And when I say kids grow up with these stories, many of us grew up with these stories. Kids have been growing up with these stories for a long time, right? These movies, they often teach kids to reject authority, tradition, family, or adults who might suggest to you, like, this is what you were made for. This is why you are here. These stories from Disney, they like get in us in a deep way that say, no one else can tell you who you are. You find yourself inside yourself. These movies, they teach each new generation to live with a deep dissatisfaction about their lives because each new generation can't quite figure out like who we are, why we're here. And the older we get, the more we can't figure out why we can't figure it out on our own. Disney's not the only one who tells stories, right? Our media is also filled with stories of the self-made hero. You can be anything you want if you just try hard enough. Work hard enough. Want it bad enough. These stories, they teach us that our value is based on what we can achieve. And not only our value, but others as well, right? And so we're failures if we don't achieve what we set out to. And people around us who might be struggling in life, well, if they're struggling, they just clearly don't want it bad enough, right? Otherwise, they would just change their lives, make different decisions. And then there are the romantic dramas and comedies that teach us that romantic love is what gives life ultimate meaning. Right? That a soulmate of some kind will complete you. And these stories, they teach us that this pursuit of our one true love is like the thing that will satisfy us. And so if we're lonely, it's because we're missing the romantic love we were made for. And if our marriages don't feel as romantic as they should, well, like maybe we're with the wrong person. I could go on. The media we consume is filled with so many different stories, and these stories shape us. Because that's what stories do. And stories, they shape us in ways that ideas alone don't seem able to. I want to give you an example of this. Thomas Jefferson. You may have heard of him. Yeah. He wrote some of the most beautiful and profound ideas ever expressed. You'll recognize this, probably. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson expresses the idea that all men are created by a Creator. You could tell he likes this idea, but that's exactly it for him. In an early draft of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson actually denounces the slavery that he clings to his whole life. He liked the idea of all men being equal, but it didn't shape the way that he lived. In his memoirs, he actually describes being willing to finally, one day, let his slaves go in his death because he liked the idea. But when it came down to it, he spent his life defending slavery and keeping his own slaves. And even when he died, the moment when he had declared previously that would be the moment when he released them all, he actually, at the last minute, made sure to sell his slaves to someone else in his death in order to pay off all of his debts. As you read Jefferson, you never get the real sense that he thinks slavery is wrong because it's wrong to own men and women that are made in the image of God. He doesn't see slave owning as an offense against the Creator, the one who created him and the people that he possesses. Right? Not in any sort of personal way. Jefferson lives with the idea of a Creator. He lives with the idea that all men are created equal, but they are just ideas for him. Jefferson didn't have time in his life for the Bible or for the stories in it. He was too busy cutting up the parts that he didn't like. Stories that might have shaped him differently. But if you compare Jefferson to John Quincy Adams, another president, a later president, you will find somebody in Adams who spent his life reading and rereading the scriptures every day, someone who internalized these stories in such a deep way that when he was no longer president, he knew that he was far from finished doing what God had made him to do. And so Adams had such a deep conviction that American slavery was an offense to our Creator that he became the first and only former president to then get elected to Congress after being president. Right? It's like you resign as the CEO, you retire as the CEO, and then you're like, I'm going to work the entry-level job. This is what Adams did. And in that place, he worked to end slavery. He worked to treat all people as created by God. And this is how he spent his life. Adam's lived his life with God. And the creation accounts in Genesis 1 and 2 were core stories for him that shaped how he saw the world, what he wanted, and how he lived, shaped his life with God in the world. This year, we are going to spend a lot of time with the narrative stories in the Bible. Obviously, not all of them. We will be selective. But we're going to start the year, the first 20 weeks in Genesis. And we're going to read them, and we're going to reread them. Before you leave today, I have a reading guide for you for the next 20 weeks. And it's got 5 readings a week, so there's a couple days to catch up if you miss one. But we will read and we will reread them. But I'm also going to encourage you to not just read them, but to tell them and retell them. To each other in our neighborhood groups, in our families, sometimes here in worship, to tell the story, right? And it won't have to be word for word, it won't have to be perfect, but the idea is what is the story that we are wrestling with, that we are internalizing it? Because as we tell it and retell it, it gets into us in a powerful way. And then we're gonna talk about these stories, and we're gonna keep talking about them, so that these stories get in us the way that the stories that we're sort of surrounded by in our culture get into us. We're going to let these stories penetrate our hearts and our minds so that God can use them to change us, to guide us, to teach us. And so as we come to each story or set of stories, we're going to explore some of the ways that these stories might shape our life, right? In the way that I did with a group of middle schoolers, what is it in the creation account that they need to hear right now as they struggle with believing that they matter in the world? Specifically with the stories of Genesis, we're going to consider why God's people have always seen these stories as core stories for a life lived with God. And this week we get to start with Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, 2 distinct creation accounts. Technically, it's Genesis 1, chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 4a, the way that most of our translations break it up. And then the second account begins in verse 4 and continues through the rest of the chapter. But you noticed the first account begins in that familiar way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I love the enthusiasm. You didn't know I was going to do that. So, but it wraps up neatly. And this will sound familiar. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. Notice the first line and the last line, heavens and earth. Heavens and earth. The second account starts in the very next verse, backwards. In the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens. Oh, it's backwards. There's also something else to note. The first account is filled with God talk. God created, God said, God saw, God separated, God made. It's all God. Everything is happening. It is God, right? Like you get the point. Everything is done by God, and everything starts far away in the heavens and slowly gets smaller and closer to us on the earth. But still, if you notice in your Bible a difference in the two accounts, In chapter 1, it is all God. But in that first line of the second account, something changes. It's not just any God, it's Yahweh God. Yahweh is the personal name that God gives to Moses on Mount Sinai after rescuing his people and bringing them to be in relationship with him. Yahweh is the personal name God gives to his people. It's his name. If the first account shows us the big, transcendent, distant, mighty God, right? It's like starting way out there past anything we can imagine. Like the God who has everything under his control and who eventually gets to us in the story. The second account starts with a named God who wants to be known as he creates a specific place for us to live. More so, while the first God speaks things into being, the second God scoops his hands in the dirt to personally form the humans. The second God breathes his very breath into the nostrils of the human, giving them his own life as their own. Two accounts, two gods. Except it's not two gods. These are put together for a reason. There is only one God, but the God is both. This God is both distant and outside of creation, and we need to know that and understand that. And at the same time, this same God is also present with us. He is both. And rather than tell us that, give us an idea about God. God is big and transcendent. He is outside of creation, and God is close. No, we just get stories. Two stories that invite us to experience this as reality. He is both. These two stories together train us to know the God who is both. And we need to know both, right? Because we can easily imagine a situation where our circumstances look dire, where things are bad, where the problems are too big for us. Pretty much anytime we read the news, we're coming into contact with situations that are way too big for us, too big for our community, too big for our country, too big for humanity. And so the first account reminds us that we worship a God more massive than we could ever know. And then there are also those moments in our lives, and we know these as well, where we have problems, but problems that feel kind of lame, kind of dumb, like small and insignificant, where we don't want to bother anybody, but they're real to us. And we wonder if there's anyone out there who could possibly care about what we're going through, but we don't really want to bother anyone. The second account reminds us that we worship a God who is more near than we can ever know. With these two pictures of God, not one or the other, but both. This is who God is. I wonder if we could just pause here and just brainstorm together for just a minute. As you think about these two accounts and whatever familiarity you have with them right now, what are some other ways these stories might shape us? In much the same way that these stories spoke a word of mattering to a group of middle schoolers, in the same way that these stories spoke equality and dignity to John Quincy Adams as he viewed his slave neighbors. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul will say that these stories, they're useful for us, for teaching us, for showing us our mistakes, for correcting us, getting us on the right path, and for training our character. And so I wonder together, as we think about these two stories, either separate or together, how they might help shape us as we seek God and live with him. So I'll just let us sit with that for, 30 seconds. And then if anybody has, if you can think of a way that these stories might shape us, a time, a moment where we might especially need them or find them useful. Yeah, Emma Ray. Emma Ray just said, in times in your life when you might be tempted to think that you can control things or that you might be able to do things sort of without God, these stories sort of help us find our place in the bigger story. Yeah, thanks. Jen. Yeah, when things are not right in the world, when people who have power use their power poorly, when there's injustice and people are hurt, this reminds us that people, all people, it sounds like you're saying the people being hurt and even the people who are misusing the power are made in the image of God. And that calls for something from us. Good. Yeah, Russ. I told a group of middle schoolers they matter. Russ's message for middle schoolers is God is listening and stuff. I like it. But in the moments when we're tempted to wonder, do our prayers matter? Is anything happening? To know that God cares about us and that they do and that they are part of a larger scheme. Did I see? Yeah, Derry. Yeah, so there's this crazy thing. Telling a group of middle schoolers that they matter feels a little bit dangerous because we live in a culture where everyone sort of thinks we matter too much. And so there's also this counter message that when we read the creation story, we don't show up to the last day. All the stuff is done. And when God has made us. And so we show up ready to work. And God's like, nope, first thing you do is rest. What? But I want to work. And God's like, yeah, well, you need to enjoy the things I've made and remember that I made it all, that you are not the most important. So, good, yeah. Well, and I like the way you said, so do I really believe it? And then you said, this is a foundational claim. Like we're not here by accident. There's somebody with a purpose and a will, intent behind our existence. And so can we find our lives aligning with that? Because that's actually the only way that we will ever find life. Thanks for the ways that this is the kind of thing I want to do with every story in Genesis as we make our way through, believing that every story in Genesis is a gift to us that will help shape who we are and how we live. As we transition in this next moment, Pastor David, there you are. Changed seats today. It was tricky. They're going to come, the team's going to come forward. We spent all of Advent talking about our core values and how our first core value is faithfulness. Well, how did we arrive at faithfulness as one of our core values? One of the answers is right here at the table. God, the creator of everything, watches us, his prized possession, destroy it all with our sin and our selfishness. But God doesn't give up on us. The story that the scriptures tell, the story we continue to announce is that God has been faithful to everything he started. And we see that faithfulness most clearly in his son, Jesus, dying for us while we were sinners, tearing apart the fabric of his good creation. And so we come to the table this morning overwhelmed and amazed that this faithful God would continue to love us.